Hey everyone, for TRICHOMES.com, I'm Ashley Manning, and this is Careers in Cannabis. On this show, we sit down with staffing agencies, cannabis companies, and other industry professionals to discuss employment opportunities in the burgeoning cannabis industry. Today's guest is a Marine Corps veteran, former cage fighter, and according to his LinkedIn profile, he states he's bridging the gap between the Bong and the Boardroom. On today's episode, we talk with Brett Puffenbarger about his first career in cannabis as the general manager to Florida's first cannabis dispensary, to co-founding Good Highdeas, which is home to the Project Mongoose movement for cannabis and hemp professionals to help clean up the cultural and ethical issues surrounding our industry. Hey, Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. I know I've been following all your LinkedIn posts and they get me excited and get me anxious at the same time, but all moving forward. Happy to have you here today. I know you've been pretty popular with getting on podcasts, so I hope we can make this one a great one for you. I always like to start with a personal check-in with you, make sure you've been doing good through 2021 and keep my fingers crossed. Has that been going good for you?
Yeah, it's great. It's the only thing that's weird is I'm in an office and I have a personal rule that I don't take meetings in offices if I can help it. I try to go on a walk or somewhere. So it's kind of interesting to be sitting down and talking to someone on a video chat for once.
Absolutely agree. It's hard to get that balance, when you live in your house and that's your office and you suddenly now your space of where you shut off and try to gain some insights and clarity and is now become your work zone. So I fully relate to that and appreciate you being here and in your office interviewing with us. So let's get right into it. Let's start with what you were doing right before the cannabis industry. It's always what I want to know is where you were right before.
I was a Harley salesman.
Nice.
To be completely frank with it, I was the director of business development for 6 dealerships at 3 states, but effectively biz dev for a different luxury product, specifically Harley. And I think that's helped me with my move into cannabis, to be very frank, because it has such a culture. Like everybody knows Harley. When you say it, it's like, oh, I know what the guy that buys a Harley looks like. I know the type of feel. I know the culture. But yeah, that was me prior to that. I mean, before that, I was in the military and I owned a karate school somewhere in the middle of that. So.
Well, that makes perfect sense. It was actually one of my thoughts before interviewing you is like, wow, you work for Harley Davidson. That's a lifestyle and a culture. This cannabis is a lifestyle and a culture. And you're bridging those two together and bringing those experiences. So working for Harley Davidson, at what point were you like, I went out, I'm done with this, and cannabis is it? What happened?
I feel like most people are afraid to admit something like this, but I got fired. And I got fired because of weed. So I didn't touch cannabis till I was 20, 26 years old. I got into a fight with my now ex, and she was like, I heard veterans do great when they smoke weed. And I'm the kind of person who was like, you know what? I'm gonna. And then it ended up being long story short on it, a guy knocked a bike off of a trailer and they pee tested the whole shift. And I got, walking papers, and I was lucky enough that cannabis had just become legal here and the industry was kind of starting to kick up. So there was a need for someone that was willing to jump in. And I think back then it was less of a destination industry like it is now. Like right now it's like cool and fun to jump into cannabis. Then it was like, oh, you want to shoot yourself in the foot for the rest of your career? Have fun, go do it. And I chose to do it anyways.
You did. You chose to take that risk. That's probably the Marine in you. There's more risk. There's more reward. I think it's the opposite of what some people say. More risk, less reward, or vice versa, however the saying goes. But so you were fired from Harley Davidson. No, I've been fired too. No shame in that. It's traditionally not our fault. But so you went on in. How did that lead into a role in cannabis, and what was that first role?
So my very first role was a general manager for this first dispensary in Florida. So I always get to have like that one little feather in my cap that I opened the first one and I made the first over-the-counter sale. I still remember the girl to this day. She was like not what you would expect for a medical, a highly recommended medical state. She was like 21 years old, college kid, like a very cool experience. And truth be told, I kind of took the proactive approach before it was what is kind of common of like, go get an industry certification and then apply for a job. And that's literally what I did. Like, there was this very first, like, I saw a billboard on the side of the road here in Orlando, and it was like, first on campus cannabis college, free for veterans. And I said, wait a
Interesting.
minute here. I'm a veteran. I like free and I want to learn about weed. Let's do this thing. So I signed up and I did their like bud tender basic course, like, hey, learn how to speak weed. And then I did
Yeah.
their general managers, like, this is how a dispensary runs. And having been at like the BDC level in Harley, it wasn't that big of a shock. And I don't know if the average person probably realizes this, but Harley makes just as much money selling t-shirts and hats as they do motorcycles, if not more. So the average
Wow.
Harley dealership is in effect sort of a car dealership, but really it's an apparel store that sells cars or motorcycles on the side. You know what I mean? Rather
Right.
than
Right.
what most people think of. So I went directly in the retail route and went, hey, me, uh, did kind of the standard job interview thing, and that was it. That was like, yeah, here you go,
Wow.
figure it out.
It's did you enjoy that job? Was it,
Absolutely not. uh,
be real. What was it that you didn't like? It seems like a tough task to ask someone to open up the first dispensary in a state when you're not around other stores who have done it. So there's no copy and paste model for you. How
I
what was
think
that
it
like?
I mean, if I know kind of what's coming because we talked about what we're going to talk about on the show. So it's actually a really good segue in this. And anybody listening, we didn't pre-plan it to go this way, but like, it was kind of my first experience of the grass attracting the snakes. You know what I mean? It was my
Mhm.
first thing where I kind of sat back and I went, this isn't quite right. Like, there's some fishy things going on in here. There's not, things aren't playing out the way you would expect them to, given the amount of scrutiny we were under. We're the very first ones, you know what I mean? There's two
Yep.
companies doing it at the time. There's 25 employees in the whole state, and everybody's staring at us. Uh,
License 001.
yeah, basically.
First mistake starts there.
I think technically we were the second license, but they
Gotcha.
all gave them out in like the same day. So it's kind of like when twins say I'm the older twin. It's like, yeah, by 8 minutes. Like, we get it, man. Like,
Gotcha.
yeah, and I went from that to the nonprofit world. I ran a veterans charity for a little bit. I was the PR director and then served as the interim CEO. We specialize in getting veterans their cannabis cards for free. So we like
Oh,
covered the doctor's appointments, and then we partnered with another charity who covered the state fee, like the $75 extortion price that you have to pay just to be able to medicate without dying. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Uh, but we that was our whole gig, and that was really great, and I loved it. But I think anybody who's ever worked in the nonprofit world knows that either you're beholden to profits. The language of the 21st century America is profits, and in a nonprofit, you're kind of stuck.
Right.
To make that super long story super short, I worked heavily on a couple of political campaigns focused around cannabis, and not necessarily ballot initiatives, but getting pro cannabis people elected. And there was a lot of thought that a certain group of us were going to end up being part of the Department of Cannabis. And when that didn't work out, and probably my second big moment of the grass attracting snakes, and kind of, like, if I haven't said it before, I'm a little bit dense and I take more than one sign to pick up on this thing. So I'm sure there's plenty of people who have come into cannabis and realized it real fast and went the other way, or figured out how to not keep running into them. I didn't. I just jumped right in the snake den without realizing it.
Wow.
So that in turn led me to my first pivot and my first cannabis entrepreneurial endeavor. So I founded a company along with a couple of other people called Native Hemp Solutions. Uh, that ended up, I sold my shares out and got out of that after a little bit. They were going in a little
Is
bit of
that
a direction that I didn't understand. And then found myself at Vanguard Scientific, did that for a little bit, and then now we're here. So if we want to fast forward all the way to today, hey, I found a
yeah.
company again.
Absolutely. There was one thing I wanted to touch base on because I found it fascinating. I think it's fascinating information for the world to hear as well. And that was when you were the project spokesperson for the Environmental Bioremediation Initiative.
Yeah, so
I
that's
found
something
it
called Hemp
just
for Water.
Okay.
And it's still actively going on. My buddy Steve Edmonds still runs it. He's kind of one of the OG hemp guys here in Florida. He's been pounding the pavement for trying to do the industrial legalization side since probably before either you or I were born, if we really want to call it like it is. And I'm not calling him old, but
OG.
so,
We'll just call him an OG.
yeah, super OG. So that whole concept is really, really simple. And I'm no scientist and I'm definitely not a cultivator, but I understand some basics of it. And cannabis and hemp, regardless of what we want to call it, it really likes nitrogen and phosphorus. And if you kind of take that idea and you look at some of the problems in waterways that we see all over the world, but specifically here in Florida, Tennessee, and Michigan, where we first kind of looked at it. So the bogs in Michigan, some of these backwater Tennessee kind of stagnant water things, and then something like Lake Okeechobee, you take the hemp and you grow it on a floating mat with no care. So we're just picking the seeds and growing them in a little clay ball on a floating mat, and eventually the roots can clean the water. So it's like kind of silly. And you go, wait a minute here. But what, and again, I'm no expert, but like that's what cattails do. Like when people plant them intentionally in their retention ponds, that's why. Hemp does it better.
Wow.
Hemp does it a lot better.
I find that just incredibly fascinating. Another fun fact too, for adding hemp onto the list of ways it can help and save our environment.
So if you want to talk about a really fun one, my new favorite one that I've learned is using it as a rotation crop. So take your corn farmer, your soy farmer, your cotton farmer, the guy who's not,
right.
They only grow 1, maybe 2 crops a year, depending on their geographical location. Half of the year, that farm is doing nothing. Well, let's throw some seeds in there and figure it out, especially if we're talking industrial, because I'm obviously not talking human consumption, CBD, like highly regulated inside grows that we would expect. But if we're making hempcrete, who cares? And there's that whole fun added benefit of hemp heals earth, full stop. Like weed fixes the planet when other plants destroy it. And I'm not going to get super into it, but like if we're just going to put a point there, that's a thing, and that's coming, and it's going to be coming more and more often. So
very exciting insight on that. I wanted to make sure it got out there so people understand. If farmers need a business plan, Brett Puffenbarger just shared you a business plan that can help generate some revenue for you.
Right. I mean, it's not going to make you rich like a lot of these, broker joker types will tell you, oh, jump in cannabis, grow my seeds, I'll buy it for me right now, we'll give it to an extract. No. But is it a potential boost in revenue? Is it a potential, at the very least, to make money on something that's otherwise sitting down and doing nothing? Heck yeah, it is.
Yep. Oh, awesome. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that insight on what you were working on as their project spokesperson. So fast forward to today. I know from the time we talked before till now, you have founded a company. You co-founded a company.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
What a great idea, right? So it kind of all started, for lack of a better term, between a friend of mine, Alex, my wife, and our now business partner, Jody, and myself, sitting back and realizing and having conversations that had nothing to do with business development, had nothing to do with anything other than when you work in the cannabis industry and you work in the cannabis industry at a certain level, your friends end up being other people that do that. You know what I mean? So we were having these conversations where it was like, oh, let me tell you about my horrible story in cannabis. Oh, let me tell you my horrible story. And we kind of realized, as bad as it makes us sound as an industry, it was damn near all pervasive. And so what we started doing, because we're those kind of edgy contrarian people that don't really care, like I'm the guy that goes, yeah, I got the same credentials as you do, and I think you're wrong anyways. We kind of started it as a hashtag, and it took off a little faster than we anticipated. We started seeing more and more people talking about it. We started getting more messages of, bro, let me tell you about XYZ guy in Colorado.
Yeah.
So that's not unique, though. Calling out the misbehavior of the industry isn't unique. I mean, let's give credit where credit's due. There's been the blacklist. There's been this and that for the last 10 years, since before I was in the industry even. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not some genius super guy, but I realized that was only half the equation. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to call out the misbehavior. I mean, we're missing the other side of that.
Absolutely.
And that is returning on that. The other thing
Hmm.
we kind of sat back and we realized through conversations is that we have two interesting disparities going on. We have a lot of major cannabis companies have cut the fat, and the people they cut are not their people. They're the people who actually built the company. They're the people who actually ran the extraction labs, who actually ran the cultivation rooms, who actually did this. And what we realized is some of the most talented people in cannabis are now on the open market because they weren't appreciated by the very people we're calling out in the stories. On the other side of that, there's an entire business class of people that are interested in cannabis that have watched what happened. They watched all the snakes chew up the first round of investment, run it into the ground, and put it in their pocket. We can see that with the recent news about, Canadian cannabis CEOs literally cutting half their company and doubling their salary every year. What? So I think there's kind of been this kind of going idea that capital dried up in cannabis. And we said, no, it didn't. It got smarter and it doesn't want to get taken advantage of. So basically, by kind of taking this first stake and going, grass attracts snakes, this is Project Mongoose. I'm ballsy enough to say that I don't want to work with somebody that doesn't agree with these tenets. You know what I mean? Like, if you can't
Hmm.
sit back and tell me that you agree with all of these, we're not playing. And I don't want to play with you. I don't care if you're the biggest guy in the room. I don't care if you've got all the money in the world. I'd rather take $10 from somebody I agree with and struggle together than I would take 10 million from some guy that just wants to turn a profit and ruin the industry. So we kind of sat there with that and realized that we have a whole bunch of talented people. And then on top of that, the ones who aren't sitting there on the sidelines have gone out and created their own successful companies. But something we learned from talking to those guys and gals, sorry, but from something we
No
learned from
harm.
talking to them is every one of their clients wanted something they didn't offer. So whether they're a website guy, and that's what they do, their clients that wanted a website, it's like, well, now I need extraction equipment. What do I do? Or that girl that does the cultivation stuff and helps them set up the grow lights and the build. Well, her client asked, well, how do I market this now that I'm growing it? And so what we figured out is that if we can stake the moral claim and then
Hmm.
step back and go, everybody that's attracted to the light, let's cross pollinate. Let's work together. Let's be, for lack of a better term, the consultant's consultant, or let's be the dot connector, but only amongst those who fit the criteria and have self declared. And we've kind of done this, and you see it all day on LinkedIn in a very contrarian way of like, hey, I see you. And if you speak up, you're only making yourself look bad. And thus far, it's gained a ridiculous amount of traction. So to kind of break that down without being super long-winded, because I know I've been sitting here talking for like a minute and a half straight without barely taking a breath.
This this is your show. This is your space.
Uh, so we're staking the claim with Project Mongoose. The shortest way to make that make sense is, have you ever seen the book Venture Deals?
I have
So
not.
Venture Deals is this really great book about learning how the venture capital world works. And it's basically two venture capitalists, an entrepreneur, and a lawyer sat down and they said, am I allowed to curse on this show?
Absolutely.
Okay. So they basically, two venture capitalists, a lawyer, and an entrepreneur sat down and said, man, our industry is full of shit. Here's a book on everything we talk about. Here's the crib sheet on our language. Here's what makes this make sense. Here's the mentality behind it. Here's the overlaying expertise that you would need to know in these scenarios. It was basically a crib sheet of, welcome to our very complicated world. I'm going to let you in on the tricks and the bullshit that they're doing before you get involved, right? So that's kind of where this came from. So what we've done is Project Mongoose is putting together an advisory board. I've got some really cool people lined up for it. I don't want to throw them out there quite yet because that'll spoil all the announcements for the next couple of weeks marketing plan. But
All right.
the idea being that Project Mongoose allows us to set this standard and provide
Okay.
insight from real experts. So what we're doing is we're taking in stories, any and all horror stories from any segment of the industry. Send them our way, grassattractsnakes.com. Real simple to remember, easy to find.
That's the hashtag too, right?
Yep, and it's a hashtag
Okay.
floating around. Any stories that come in there, we're probably going to end up calling the person. We're going to have a full conversation. We can keep them
Wow.
anonymous. But the idea is that we're going to put these stories out there with the expertise laid over it in footnotes and commentary so that they go from being not just stories and not just warnings, but allegories
Mhm.
of how to do better, allegories of how we
Wow.
can train people how to do this better. And then to bring in that second step. So we have train hire culture. That's simple. We're going to come in, we're going to do some mild assessments, and then we're going to go grab the advisory board people that fit best and plug them in. And we're not talking this like bullshit pay to play industry associate. No, all of that's crooked too. I'm going to be doing more and more calling of them out. So no, get rid of that. We're legitimately just working together, and we're working
Yeah.
together because we share a moral fiber and because we're an industry that should have been built on advocacy and created through activism. And we had a choice and we failed miserably at that choice. We have the legacy guys and we have whatever you want to call them, the Chads, the business class of people. One side should have been the heart and the other should have been the brain. And somehow we didn't get either of either. We got a little bit of heart from the Chads and we got a little bit of brain from the legacy instead of a whole lot. You get where I'm going with that.
Yep, absolutely.
So then the final kind of piece to this puzzle is not only do we want the stories, we want to help the good people find the good people to work for. I'm not talking about
Right.
staffing or recruiting or any of that. I'm talking about legitimately, let's do this together. Let's build a community so that we can be cross pollinating like that, with the
Mhm.
entire idea that the only service I really care about other than connecting people is vetting the people we work for or work with. And I think my little final piece to that whole long rambling thing about what we're doing is that it takes a lot more than a fancy pitch deck, a couple of connections, and a nice cap sheet to be worth investing in. You're not going to learn everything about somebody by asking 2 or 3 references that they provided you and a background check. It's going to take a whole lot more than that. And I think that that's a key thing. If we're going to help the new transplants to the industry, or if we're going to help the people who've already been chewed up and spit out, if we're going to help any of that, it's going to kind of start with that byline of like, you got to learn how to call out the bullshit and you got to learn how to help others do it too, or else we're going to keep watching it happen over and over and over in new states and eventually in new countries.
It's true. That is 100% accurate. I am excited for what you guys are bringing forward because there's good and the bad. You know, some people you can focus in on all the bad and in any industry and focus in on the good. I think helps highlight them. But you guys talking to these companies that are being called out, smart idea. You know, I hope they get back to you too.
So
I know no one likes to be called out, but if they want to protect, if they want to protect what their name is and what they stand for, they're going to want to take that phone call
I think the thing
because
that's different or the thing that's really changed for this is that the things like the blacklist or the other kind of legacy version of calling them out,
yeah,
they could easily dismiss that and say, who are you? What are you? You don't look like me. You don't talk like me. You've never done this, because it's usually by and large the legacy market calling out the Chad market. And we don't want to be like that. I'm okay with
right.
calling out both sides and I'm okay with supporting both sides because I think they both have a place. I think it's about finding where those two meet in the right way.
Yeah. They'll definitely meet. They're getting there for sure. I think you said it spot on. Got the heart on one side and the brains on the other, and there's nothing connecting those two. So, looking forward to what Good Ideas brings to the table. Is Project Mongoose one of several projects, or the
Yeah,
start
so
project?
that's going to kind of be the beacon that allows us to be that moral standing. So we've got 2 other officially announced projects that are getting built out right now. So we've got Train Hire Culture, THC. Ha, funny.
Okay.
We're marketers.
Witty.
So the idea there being, you can't fix any of this if you don't go at the top. So we're talking about doing cultural curves, secret shopping, and executive coaching with that. So basically, like,
Ooh.
hey, let's go ahead and open the door with Project Mongoose. Let's call you out, and now let's have a conversation, because that whole idea is, I'm not the little guy anymore. We're the same
Yeah.
as you, man. I've been in the same shoes you have, run the exact same operation for a long time, and did pretty darn good at it. Let me help you do better. So that's one. The other side of that is Can It Convert, which is
Okay.
baseline advisory services for companies and investors looking to come in the industry. So, like,
Hmm.
are you interested in cannabis, but you don't know where you get to start? Let's give you the crib sheet. Let's get you vetted with the right people. Let's get you pointed in the right direction, because we all know tie it back. Grass attracts snakes.
Mhm.
Look out. And then the other side of that too would be individuals. So again, not looking to be a recruiter, never going to do that, but I do want to help find these people a home, and I do want to help them transplant again in the right way because the grass attracts snakes. And then
Yeah.
I've got one more kind of super fun secret project that we have not announced the name of, but I'll let you have like the sneak preview idea of it.
Well, thank you.
I think along the lines of the capital getting smarter and the operational requirements becoming more and more difficult in new states, that managed services is going to be a big deal. And it's going to be a really big deal coming soon. And I think that a lot of these managed services could, can, and will be created using the cast offs that the idiots let go. So I got a little plan to meld those two. Go ahead and give me, the whole like, give me you're tired, you're sick, and you're hungry, and I'll build an army. I'd like to do that, and I think that's the next stage. We haven't quite finished flushing that one out,
Okay.
but I'd like to take the opportunity to help the people who have been chewed up the hardest and the most affected by the snakes, and the people who are most likely to get preyed on them, and marry those together in a way where the new money coming in and the new people interested don't have to deal with the day in and day out chaos that we all do living here. And some of us thrive, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Some of it's just
Yeah.
fun old cannabis chaos, and some of it is the grass attracting snakes. But I'd like to make those two things congeal into a real thing, because I think we have a massive amount of talent and a massive amount of interest that need to be married up.
Absolutely. I was just talking with someone and said, we dug the foundations. I don't want to say myself because I'm only 5 years into this industry, but the people who have been in it, dug the hole, need to come together with the people to put on that first floor of the house. And it's scary as well to have someone put that first floor on your house because you're growing and they're coming in telling you did poured the concrete wrong here, and you dug the hole wrong there. The plumbing's messed up there, and it's hard when you've been doing this for sometimes 20-30 years. That's the way you've been doing it, and until those two can meet together, that house is never going to be built. And it's hard to see that. I want to see those come together, just like yourself. I think a lot of people are going to learn from your stories because they, with the input, the insights of the people that are working for you, to say this is what you should be doing in this situation, because we all have these same stories, and you don't
These
know what you don't
situations
know.
aren't going to stop either.
Absolutely.
There is no culling the herd of the predatory green rush class that's come to cannabis.
Absolutely.
But there is
And
a good way to take the wind out of their sails for the good of everybody, not just to make money, but like, hold your roll and let's teach you guys too. Because I think some
yes.
of them don't know.
Yep.
I'll be very frank. I think a lot of people who speak the way I do, or use some of the slang I choose to use, like the Chad kind of slang. I think a lot of people forget that they're people too, and they don't know what they don't know, and I don't think they're all bad. Are there some of them who are legitimately dyed in the wool, snaky as snaky comes? If you peel the first layer off, there's another snake underneath. Yeah, sure. Most of them probably don't even realize they're doing it. And I think it would be as simple and as good as, let's open up the conversation. Let's have a real talk, and let me break it down for you, because it's not meant as a condemnation, and it's not meant as a finger pointing. It's meant as a guy turning around with a flashlight and saying, I've walked this path too, and you're straying.
True. Very true. So with all the talk of the snakes attracts the grass attracts snakes, would that sound scary to someone who wants to have a career in cannabis? They know they've been growing at home and they want a career in cannabis. Do you think that could steer them away by hearing something like that? Or what would be some advice you want to give to those who want to get into the industry but are afraid of those snakes? And there's lots of people out there who say the same thing because they've heard these stories as well from those in the industry.
So I think I've got a two-part answer to that.
Okay.
Do I want to scare people off that would otherwise make amazing contributions to the community? No. But if me saying that scares them off, they wouldn't make it here anyways. And I don't mean to be
It's true.
callous about that, but like
It's true.
those of us who have been in the industry more than a couple of months have learned have learned that. You know what I mean? I think it
Yeah.
doesn't go a couple of days on LinkedIn that I don't see some high caliber marketer or sales guy who thinks he was, hot shit because he came from a big name company, not unlike me, you know what I mean? And he goes, I'm never coming back. I'm out. I'm out of the industry. I'm not doing it. And I see that pretty regularly. So part of me is kind of like, well, if that bothers you, then you're probably not going to make it. But to me, I'm not saying it with that intention. That's just kind
Got
of
it.
the underlying subtext.
Yeah.
My intention with it is that it should be a healthy warning to be cautious and to take a double look. It's not to do it.
Hmm.
It's not to make the leap. Obviously, I've made the leap and I've continued to try to take risks and make leaps in the industry. It is to be aware, again, with that kind of thought of been there, done that. Here's the path. Here's my flashlight. Don't step on that rock. It's really a toad or whatever you want to call it.
Or a snake.
Right. Or both.
Yeah. So what would be some advice for someone that wants to get in? How could they go about finding who these companies are? This has been an ongoing conversation I have with several people. What's the best source for someone who has the credentials to be in this industry? They just need to get in.
Do it. It's that simple. Plug away at doing it. I'll be very frank. LinkedIn is probably the greatest place on the entire planet for cannabis business right now because one, all of us who have been running social media pages or companies in the cannabis space for a couple of years know that the other 11 social media sites hate us, with the exception of maybe
Yes.
Clubhouse, which is exciting, but I'm not an iPhone guy, so
Yes.
I don't have it. But
Now,
I'm debating on buying an iPad just for it. But still, with the exception of maybe TikTok and Clubhouse,
hmm
LinkedIn's the only place we can go. And it
hmm
just so happens to be that it's a little bit easier on LinkedIn than anywhere else because one, it's a content deprived format, meaning that less percentages of people who participate in LinkedIn are posting than they do on the average site, right? So most
Yep.
people are lurkers on LinkedIn. Fun fact number one. Fun fact number two, it's the world without gatekeepers. You could go find a cannabis CEO right now. You're talking to one, but like you could find 100 of us. You could find ones that are 10 times bigger than me, bigger than I'll ever be. And you could send them a message right now. You could go record it. I had a guy yesterday or the day before send me a 1 minute YouTube video view just like this of him saying, yo, dude, this is what I want to do in cannabis. And I'm not a cannabis packaging guy, but I can do cool stuff. Can we talk? We're talking. I'm going to listen because it was creative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's something that happens on LinkedIn. So I think that's one. I think two is don't be afraid to stake the fact that you're coming to cannabis out there. Like, don't put it out there because I think a lot of people don't want to be in cannabis till they're in cannabis. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I
They're
don't want to
afraid.
say I'm interested in a cannabis job till I get that VP role.
Yep.
Well, buddy, nobody in cannabis is going to bring you on unless we understand you speak our language. And part of me would normally say if we were in any other industry, get some education on it first. And I'm not talking
Okay.
necessarily like a 4-year degree or grad school. Like those are all great. I didn't go to those things for cannabis. I went to those things for other things. You know what I mean?
hmm
But get some level of baseline certification in the industry so that we know that you talk our talk and speak our language. I don't think anybody cares how great you are at a niche skill. Because unless it's cultivation, all the rest of them are niche skills that have nothing to do with cannabis unless you speak the language, right? So let's use like a marketer, for example. I don't care how great of a marketer you are. I don't care about your pay per click campaign. I don't care about your ability to build a personal brand. I don't care about any of that. If you don't know what I say when I say, man, I went to the local MSO and I grabbed a G, a shatter, and then I grabbed some, you know what I mean? Like, if you don't speak that language, you're not going to make it here. And those are things that we're expecting our baseline people to know. The bud
Yeah.
tender, the trimmer, the sales rep, the entry level guy has to know this shit. So don't think you can make the transplant to a director or a vice president or an executive level without being able to do it. But on the other side of that, If you can speak that language, we're a talent-starved industry and we're growing in leaps and bounds from every sector. I see just as many of those guys get chewed up and ran off from the industry because they can't handle it. I see an exciting announcement at this company, that company over here from tech, consumer packaged goods, medical field, like you name it. We're pulling the heavy hitters now because we're becoming a destination industry, but we're going to stop doing that if we continue to let the snakes run the show.
Accurate. Do you think legalization, you don't have to share your political point of view if you don't want to. Do you think legalization will increase the snakes or possibly cut the snakes out?
Depends. It depends on how we talk about legalization, because I think there's a lot of very specific minutiae between decriminalization, legalization, and then types of legalizations. Are we talking horizontal marketing and home grow like Oklahoma? $2,500 for a license, figure it out, open season, and grow 6 plants at home apiece or 12 plants at home apiece. That would be great. I think that's a really good way to run the snakes out of the industry. On the other side of that, do you have Florida, where it's forced vertical integration, 22 licenses, 300,000 patients, only 11 of them are actually producing products. So it's basically shooting fish in a barrel with no incentive for anything. No, not at all. That's terrible. It's useless. You know what I'm saying? Depends is the short answer. And I think it all stems back to, if we're going to have a truly innovative industry and we're going to make any sort of correlation to another industry, I hate comparing us to alcohol for so many reasons, but that's the only industry I can think of that came from a post-prohibition era to a current boom. So what we see if we make that like parallel is there's an 84-year gap between the end of alcohol prohibition and the legalization of homebrew. In that time, we only had 6 or 8 major brewing companies in the world, or in the United States. You know what I mean? Pabst Blue Ribbon, Molson's, Coors, Budweiser, a couple other smaller ones. We're done. The second they legalized homebrew, you can't go to a city in America, a major city, 100,000 people or more, without seeing 3 craft breweries, a craft distillery, and 4 steak restaurants that have their own special custom craft brew.
True.
Am I wrong? We all know about the craft beer guy. Every guy knows the white dude with a beard and the beanie and the sweater is going to drink his, well, I need the locally sourced. That's a thing. But I think that cannabis is going to and could follow that. So if we get the ability at the end of the day for home grow and horizontal licensing, meaning low barrier to entry to attempt, because at the end of the day, competition is gonna let that surpass. And obviously money gives you a head start. But when you pay $2,500 for a license and you can experiment with it at home first, you're gonna see real innovation, real entrepreneurship, and real domination from some really kick-ass craft stuff. On the other side of that, if we get the legalization like we see in Florida or Massachusetts or Virginia, where we have forced vertical integrated tiered licenses, or even worse, like Virginia, where they're forced vertical integrated tiered licenses with a set geographical area and 1 legal dispensary each, you go, what? No, that would never be sustainable. So I think we're kind of at that crux where who knows how that's going to play out. Ideally, if we end up with national legalization, state by state can do it, and you're going to see the states blow up that allow it. Why do you think California cannabis is kicking ass to everybody on the East Coast? Because there's 7,000 more brands, and I don't mean that figuratively. I literally mean thousands and thousands of more brands doing thousands and thousands of more things, and the cream will rise to the top. When you keep it lidded, there is no cream, there is no top. It's just 1 barrel with 1 really big fish that's 5 guys that all know each other and act like they're in competition.
Sounds accurate. Well, only time's going to tell. I think we're a few years away from any type of decision being made here. I think there's a lot going on economically and in society, which the industry can help with. But I don't think anyone's actually taking us seriously. And I think a little bit has to do with some of the snakes that are in it. Maybe they have a little bit, the snakes also have something to do with legalization too.
Ooh, I mean, we see that right now in Florida. Two of the largest multi-state operators put $1 million toward a ballot initiative that would continue forced vertical integration into adult use markets. So the third most
Oh,
populous state in the country, they're trying to buy their way into a forced vertical operated recreational market. Can you imagine being one of 22 license holders? And you can see
no.
that playing out in all kinds of weirdness. So if I go to
Hmm.
California right now and you tell me you have a small vertical operation with 7 dispensaries, you're worth like 30 or 40 million dollars. It's not a huge amount. Yet that exact same operation just sold for 213 million dollars in Florida.
Hmm. There's some fish there too with those snakes.
Yeah, there's something going on.
Definitely, for sure. Well, you've been bringing some really valuable insights again, and we've covered a lot here today. And I really want to make sure people take back what you have to say. I think the people who are getting into the industry need to be very well aware of everything around them and what's going on with the companies they're working for and how they operate and who's also helping them, who's also investing in those companies as well. If someone wants to take it up a notch, they might not be directly involved in day-to-day operations, but that person could be funding that company. Guess what? The boss on top has to follow the person that's paying them to run their operation. So yes, we are definitely on to something. I appreciate your mission. Is there anything that you would anything else you'd want to share with anyone who is seeking a career in cannabis or is currently in cannabis and is trying their hardest to advance their role, but there's the other people coming in helping to build that first floor, and the people that are in it are saying, I've been here digging the foundations for this house and building the foundations. I can't help with the first floor. It's hard for people to get there.
Together. Work together. Work together. I'll say it one more time just so everybody gets it. Work together. Cannabis is a team sport. Full stop.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do at the end of the day is to continue to build the team like the Avengers. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of what's happening that's wrong in corporate cannabis comes from toxic culture. And I think toxic culture comes
Absolutely.
from Dunning-Kruger syndrome, for lack of a better term. So you have a whole bunch
I
of
like that.
people who don't know what they're doing, and they're just now realizing they don't know what they're doing and that the people underneath them actually do. And they're intentionally making toxic cultures to save their jobs at the hurt or the detriment to the company. So I
Yes,
think
the pawns of the chessboard.
right, exactly. So I think at the end of the day, it's I'll be super cavalier, and I think I say this 10 times a day on telephone calls, but it all kind of started with a little bit of a punk rock song, and it's like in a vast network of sharks and minnows, why is it that we have yet to converge and stand up and take a stand against the sharks? Because you can't eat all the minnows at once if you outnumber them. You know what I mean? And I think it starts with the small and medium sized ancillary service providers and the people who have been eaten up and spit out the other end of the snakes, standing up and going, hey, wait a minute, guys. There's a whole bunch of us that actually know what's going on, actually know how to run a business in cannabis, and we can help you. And that's what we're trying to do here is, the whole idea is that all tides rise, rising tides rise all ships, or whatever that silly thing is. I think that applies more here than almost any other industry. And if we really want to get super wax poetic with it, it's like the whole Bob Marley thing. You know what I mean? The herb is the healing of the nation. We'll start fucking acting like it.
Agree. I love that and that end statement there. So thank you so much, Brett, for your time today. I look forward to having you back on. Where can our listeners find Good Highdeas? Is
So you can find
the
it
website
at goodhighdeas.net, on all the social media as the Good Highdeas. And then obviously find me on LinkedIn. Myself and Alex Popoff are pretty constantly taking the fight to the big guys as much as we can and trying to build our network there, because I think it's the last major hyper growth platform out there. So come find us there and let's start to talk. I'm that guy who's 70 messages behind in my inbox, but I've made it a personal mission that I will meet with every single person who messages me. I don't care who it is.
Kudos to you for staying true to your passion, and congratulations on co-founding your company, Good Highdeas.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brett. My thanks again to Brett Puffenbarger for being my guest on today's episode. You can follow our series Careers in Cannabis, as well as more great shows like this one at TRICHOMES.com. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share, please reach out. You can reach the show by emailing careersincannabis@trichomes.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, because it really, really helps others to find the show. You can also join in the discussion with industry insiders by visiting trichomes.com and following us on all social media. For trichomes.com, I'm Ashley Manning. Thank you for listening and be well.